In this video, we're going to go over one of the most common data manipulation shortcuts that you need to know in Excel, which is what you use when you're hiding, unhiding, grouping, and ungrouping rows and columns. And you might wonder what exactly this means and why we need to do this. What does hiding, unhiding, what does grouping and ungrouping actually mean? And the easiest way to explain this is to just show you, which I'll do right now. So to group two columns, for example, we select them both, and then we have them grouped like that. We see that minus sign. And then now that we have them grouped together, we can also hide them. So now when we're going across, we see the customer name, the industry name, the product quantity, the category, the order date, address, and phone number. But the number of employees and then the product price are now hidden. So it's not too useful with the set of data that we have in front of us right here, but it's used all the time when a client sends you information that might extend all the way across two screens. So in a lot of cases, you'll have information that extends all the way out here, all the way to column Z. And in a lot of cases, a good portion of it is not really relevant or is less important than other parts, and you only want to look at maybe the 5 or 10 most important columns. So in those cases, you use this functionality all the time. And you can also do the same thing with rows, and I'll show you that right now. So let's say that we have these two Victoria's entries, and we just want to skip over those for whatever reason or not pay attention to them. So we'll group these together, we'll hide them, and now they've basically disappeared. And the only reason we know that they're actually hidden is because the rows here are skipped from 5 to 8, and because we see that plus sign on the side. So now we'll just unhide them once again, ungroup them. So that's what you're using this for. And this may not be something that you've seen too much in Excel before, but it's used all the time in models and used all the time when you get a huge set of data from a client or from someone else within your bank. Now to go into the shortcuts to actually do this, there are actually multiple different keys you can use. And I'll go through both sets just so you can have all the information. And then I'll explain which set I prefer and which set I prefer to use. So to group a row or column like this, the first thing that you do, and we'll go through the column example first, is you first select the entire column with Control Spacebar. So in this example, let's actually select the industry and number of employees columns. So we pressed Control Spacebar, then we press the right arrow key to select both of them. Now to group it, you hit Alt D G G. The Alt D takes you to the data manipulation keys, and then the G takes you to group, and then the G key again tells you that you want to group it. And then to hide it, you press Alt D G H. So Alt D takes you to the data manipulation keys. Then the G tells Excel that you want to group things or deal with grouping or hiding things. And then the H key tells Excel that you want to hide it. So if you can remember that mnemonic for it, it's pretty easy to remember and it comes to you intuitively after a while. But Alt D G G to group it together, and then Alt D G H to hide it. Now if you want to show it again, as you might expect, it's Alt D G S, S to show. So Alt D G H to hide, and then Alt D G S to show. And then if you want to ungroup these, again, you do the same thing. Control Spacebar, right arrow key to select both of them, and then Alt D G U to unhide. So if you just remember that G is group, U is ungroup, H is hide, and then S is show, then you should have no trouble remembering this shortcut. It's just Alt D G and then press the key of whatever it is you want to do. And of course you can do the same thing with rows, so we can press Shift Spacebar here, the down arrow key, and then Alt D G G to group them, Alt D G H to hide, Alt D G S to show, and then Alt D G U to ungroup them. So that's how we do it. And as I said, there are a couple different keys you can hit to do this. The reason why I like the Alt D G combination is because I think it's easier to reach all the keys because you can basically just use your left hand on the keyboard. Sometimes, depending on which key you're hitting, if it's the U key, for example, you might have to use your right hand as well, but it's just easier for me personally to do it, and I suspect it'll probably be easier for you too, especially once you get the hang of this. Now, I mentioned before that there are a couple different keyboard shortcuts you can use to do this. So I'll walk through the alternate combination right now and some of the different keys you can use to do this. And it's good to know these in case they happen to come up. Personally, I don't like doing it this way as much because these key combinations are harder to reach and harder to use with only one hand, so I think they're a little bit more inconvenient. But in the interest of completeness, I'll just show them to you anyway. So let's go back to the column example. We'll press Control Spacebar and then Shift and the right arrow key to select the second column here. And this time we're going to press Shift Alt right arrow key to select the whole thing. And then to hide it, we press Control 0. To unhide it, we press Shift Control 0. And then to ungroup it, we press Shift Alt left arrow key. So let me just go through that one more time. In this combination, we press Shift Alt right arrow key to group something. Then we press Control 0 to hide the columns that we've grouped. Then we press Shift Control 0 to unhide them. Then we press Shift Alt left arrow key to ungroup the selection. So that's another way you could do it. I typically don't do it like that because, again, the Alt DG combination is just what I've used before, and for me it's easier to hit that quickly. Also, I think it's a little bit less intuitive to remember this because you don't have a key letter that corresponds to what you're doing, whereas with Alt D G G, for example, you can remember the G means group. So I prefer the other one, but that is another way you could do it. Now, if we want to do it with rows, it's a little bit different. What we would do with rows is we would press Shift Spacebar, then the down arrow key to select these two rows. We would again press Shift Alt right arrow key to group them. But this time to hide the rows, we wouldn't press Control 0, we would actually press Control 9 here. So Control 9 to hide the rows, and then Shift Control 9 to unhide the rows. And then once again, we press Shift Alt left arrow key to ungroup it. So this is actually another reason why I don't like this way of doing it, because you have to remember separate combinations. You have to remember that it's Control 0 for columns, but Control 9 for rows. Which I think is harder to memorize than just knowing the one shortcut for hiding and unhiding things. But it is another way to do it, and depending on how you're using the keyboard and your level of experience with Excel and what else you're doing, you may find one of these sets of combinations easier to use than the other. Now, if you're wondering where this grouping, ungrouping, hiding, and unhiding is actually used in the real world, let's actually go over to the valuation template that we have in another part of this program. And you see how it's being used right here. We have displayed all these companies on the screen in our public company comparable set. And what we've done here is we've grouped together some of the data in these particular columns and hidden it. And let me just unhide it and show you why. So again, we'll go here and press Alt D G S, and that unhides everything. And we see that basically we're doing it because we have a lot of data in here to calculate our enterprise value and to calculate our equity value. And when we're quickly going through these comparables, we don't actually want to show this whole thing. We just want to kind of get a summary. And this is probably the most common use for grouping, ungrouping, and hiding data in Excel. When you're looking at a set of comparables and you don't want to see the whole thing, you want to just get a kind of a summary overview of what's going on and use it all the time here. So let's just select this whole column again and do Alt DGH to hide it. We'll select these columns with Control Spacebar and then Shift right arrow key, and then Alt DGH to hide those. So that's an example of how you might use it in the real world and how we've used it elsewhere within this program. But these shortcuts come in handy, and you actually end up using them all the time, a lot more often than you might think just from watching this. Now, to get some practice doing this on your own, here's what I want you to do. I want you to look at this set of data, and let's say that we're going through it and we're trying to make a summary of this data for our team, and they don't care about the industry of these customers or the number of employees they have. They just want to get a summary of how many products they've ordered and what prices those products have been ordered at. So I want you to go in here and do exactly what I'm about to do on screen right now and group together these two columns, column B and column C, hide them, and then unhide them so that they're still there, but we can easily collapse and expand them whenever we want. So let me just do that right now. Okay, so you should pause this video right now and then do exactly what I just did on screen, where you group together columns B and C, you hide them, and then you show them once again. So pause the video right now and do that. Okay, good. So let me just undo everything I did, and then I'll walk you through it this time by giving you the keyboard shortcuts as well. So we'll just hit Control Z a couple times to undo everything here. So the first thing we do here is press Control Spacebar to highlight the column, and then Shift and the right arrow key to highlight column C as well. Then we press Alt D G G to group them together, and then we press Alt D G H to hide them. And then to show them again, we press Alt D G S, and that shows the columns that we hid before. And you can do this using the other keyboard combinations I showed you as well. And let me just go over that. Again, we do the same thing where we press Control Spacebar to highlight this whole column, then Shift and the right arrow key to highlight the next one. Then this time we press Shift Alt right arrow key. Then we press Control 0 to hide the columns. Then we press Shift Control 0 to show them again. So that's another way you can do it. And again, it's a personal preference. I like the Alt-DG combination better, but you can use this as well. So that about wraps it up for our video on hiding, unhiding, grouping, and ungrouping data. In the next one, we're going to get into more of the display functionality and manipulating the data. And we're going to look at how you freeze panes in Excel and then how you zoom in and zoom out on data.